My guest today is Alan Briggs. He is the author of the book Anti-Burnout, A Lighter Way to Live and Lead in a Heavy World. And he's got a variety of different background experiences 13 years of pastoring, 12 years of leadership development, 11 years of coaching, 5 years of business development, and 4 books published. In our conversation today, we talk about, well, how do we make sure that we don't experience burnout? If we are trending towards that, what are some practical strategies to overcome that? And then just what are moments that God has provided for him in his life? So he is the father of 4 children, husband of 1 wife, and lives in the Colorado Springs area. So it's my privilege to introduce you to my new friend, Alan. We're live. Alan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
So I like to invite guests that have provided for me. It's a little bit easier when the guest is an author. So I've had a chance to dive into part of your book, Anti-Burnout, here. So there's lots of good provision stories within that. And I wanted to invite you to start off by reflecting on your grandfather, the 90-year-old plus who I think jumped out of an airplane. So in his 90s. So tell us about your grandfather a little bit.
Oh, man. I want to be like him when I grow up, in short. And that's actually my favorite part of the book. It's the most personal part of the book. To end with, he gave me in many ways a vision of the good life. And he's optimistic and he's hopeful. A couple years ago, Justin, I asked him, "What are you learning about? What are you reading about?" And he's like, "Oh, man, I'm reading about investing." And I was struck by the fact that a 94-year-old man is reading about investing. And I'm thinking, how long do you think you're going to be around?
Yeah.
And he's fascinated by compounding interest and he's still curious at age 94. Here's a cool provision story. Last week, 2 weeks ago, my grandpa said, "You guys have been with me through a really hard season of my grandma passing away." He got remarried on his 96th birthday, by the way, got remarried. That's just who he is. And he said, "I've been saving up, I've been pinching my pennies, and I want to take you guys on a cruise." And so he paid for all these folks as a gift to go on a cruise and say, "Thank you for being there for me." And it was just so special to hear those stories of the 12, including my parents that were there, to just be there and celebrate. And I don't know what they did. And I play pinochle or whatever you do with 90-some-year-olds and go see Alaska. And I was struck by that because he's not a guy that has tons and tons of money, but he's a guy that invests that into experiences. And he always invested in experiences over stuff. He and my grandma traveled the world before it was as easy or cheap as it can be today. And probably the thing I'm struck by the most is that every single month he sends me a crisp $100 bill and says, "Go invest this in people." And he doesn't put any limits on it. And so I literally have $100 bills in my wallet. And when the right opportunity comes up, I'm like, my grandpa, who's 97, affords me the ability to just say, "Go to a nice dinner, go do some experience with your family." And I'm sort of ready to give this money away because it was given to me freely. That's who he is. And so essentially, that's who I want to be when I'm 97, if I get to live that long.
What a legacy. That is fantastic. And he also sounds like a blessing speaker because I think you make a comment in your book that you have a note that your grandfather has written or that he writes to you. Does he do that often?
Yeah, what's interesting is he is part of the greatest generation. Some have called the silent generation. And he struggles to speak that blessing with his words. And so I think those notes are those moments to still capture that with his shaky handwriting, to still be able to capture that. But luckily, my dad really understood that and learned and said, "Hey, he's not going to be good at everything." And my dad is phenomenal at speaking life with his words. And so when people share, Justin, about nightmare stories about not having a father in their life or not having a family lineage or heritage, one side of my family has that story, and then the other side of my family just has this legacy of males who did care and did provide, not just with their wallet, but with their emotions and with their time and energy. And so I feel so lucky, and I want to steward that and ultimately be a life giver, a life speaker, one who has an abundance mentality that can speak life over you and that doesn't take any value away from anybody else, to be able to do that. So I really have hit the jackpot in that area.
Yeah, it stood out to me. I wanted to start right there, just getting a little sense of your grandfather and what a legacy that is, and I didn't know about the $100 crisp $100 budget and what a blessing that is for you to do for others, and that's amazing. I love that we get a chance to start a conversation with that. So thank you. So we're new friends here, and fortunately, like I said, you've written a book to help me understand your work, which I'm super excited about. And so I wanted to do this. I wanted to give you. You said you're up for anything, so I'm going to give you three choices. There's a chapter section in your book called "The Sliver of Opportunities." There's three stories. Feel free to riff on all of them, but I wanted you to at least pick one to start with that stood out to me. So for the listeners, if you haven't read the book, he provides these different kind of mini chapters on themes, and I love this one about just taking advantage of sliver of opportunity. So I'll list out the three stories from the section, and then start with whatever one you want to. So here we go. Number one is a time where a mistaken identity led to a wilderness trip. Number two, a coffee shop comment led to working in Antarctica. And number three, flying to a business leader's house unannounced.
All right. Because I can't pick just one, let me quickly do two. The mistaken identity. I got to start there. So I was pastoring, and back in the day, and when you're a pastor, everybody knows you, and you struggle to know everybody else's names. At least for me, that was one of the most challenging things. And there was a guy who I was sure was the brother of somebody else that I knew. They looked just alike. And I remember, and I went up to him and said, "Hey, man, how's your bro doing?" He's like, I don't have a brother. And I was like, well, tell me about you. It was kind of that would have been awkward. Let's push into this. Tell me about you. End up, you can just tell this guy's just an awesome guy, life giver. I'm surprised I haven't seen him before or met him before. And it's like, let's get coffee this week. And so we went out to coffee. And then halfway through there, he's sharing he had just gotten married. He had just graduated with his master's and just interested in a lot of similar things. And I said, hey, man, I know this is strange, but we leave in 6 days for a wilderness trip to Moab, Utah. And we could use one more person. Any chance you want to come join us? And in those days, he said, yeah, this is kind of crazy. I'll talk to my wife. Of course, newly married, I need to talk to her, but I think this could work.
Wow.
Ends up, not only does he come on that trip, but he is up for all the adventures we're doing, and he's a professional chef. So he kind of waits on us hand and foot that whole time. We eat the best wilderness food I have ever eaten out in the desert, out in the canyons. And so we got a friend out of it. And so many years later, we're still friends, kind of raised our families together, been in groups together from that one mistaken identity comment. I was sure he was somebody else's brother. By the way, his brother, I haven't seen in many years, haven't seen that family, but that was just that
Mm.
one introduction to them was that scary, hey, you want to go grab some coffee and just figure out who you are, and then the invite from that one.
Love it.
And the other one, very very quickly, I'll move toward this. There was a very well known doctor who I had gotten in a relationship with, had gotten to know, and just respected his faith, his take on life, his abundance mentality, and just the joy that he had about him. You would not think that he's a doctor. You wouldn't think that he's made a lot of money. Has an incredible reputation in this city he lives in the Midwest. Like a hero there in this town. But we were away. We were actually on a wilderness experience. And so I got to know him in a unique environment. We connected. And I remember him saying, I'd really like some help with that. And so about 2 weeks later, I texted him, hey, would you still like some help with that? So I got to be in a close relationship with him, and being a leadership coach. At some point, there's like a, hey, man, I think I can help you professionally beyond just a friendship. Began to talk with him, and he said, yeah, I need coaching. Yeah, I need coaching. But this guy, I mean, I don't even know how much his time is worth, Justin, but it's insane to calculate. He
Mm.
literally does LASIK surgeries, and he's done, I think, 100,000 of them himself. But if you can imagine how valuable his time is. And I was writing a book for him. I was spending a lot of time with him. And he's like, I want coaching up, I want coaching help. And I needed by the end of the year to know, do you have my one slot or not? And I've got this slot for you. And he told me that he was going to be at his home in Napa Valley during this amount of time. We had connected several times on the phone. He's a little more easy to reach there. I had his cell, he has mine. And so, without even really thinking about it, I asked my wife, "Would you be all right if I took a 24-hour trip out to be able to have this 2-hour conversation with this guy?" Sort of corner him and say, "I'm okay if this is a yes or no. Do you want coaching? Do you need what I have to offer?" And so flew out, had an amazing time. He's like, "Oh man, instead of talking on the phone, let's talk in person." Went on a walk with him that morning, and ultimately it didn't lead to coaching, which I was fine with. But I got on that plane, and it was the last thing I did before ending work that year. As it was about mid-December, it got my decision from him, and I needed to know one way or the other. We're still friends these days. We still text and chat once in a while within that. But that was what I needed to do, was to go, I don't know, pay $176 for that, cheap 24-hour flight to get that 2-hour conversation just to gain clarity.
Thank you for sharing both those stories because they both have the theme of just being brave with people. And sometimes that's the scariest thing to be is with other people in relationships. So you're putting yourself out there, stepping into awkward moments or leaning into
Yep. Mhm.
ambiguity and saying, like, let's just get clarity here and know what the next steps are. So that's probably a good segue into that's what you do. You are a leadership coach. You're helping people gain that clarity. And something unique that I saw about your bio is not only leadership development with a focus on health, but also a sabbatical coach. Tell us about that. Like, how do you help people maximize a sabbatical? And maybe let's just start a little bit high level. Like, what is a sabbatical for someone that may not be like in the ministry space or has ever done one before?
Yeah, I was actually talking with a business leader yesterday. She's a high powered executive, and she said, "We need this in the business space." And I said, "I know. And I do some of that, and we're working toward that. We're going to have to massage some of the language there." But across our culture, I mean, we are exhausted. And again, I write into this in Anti-Burnout, but we are so overwhelmed in our culture. We are overrun, we are over functioning, so many overs that we're longing for that margin and that space. And really, I mean, as a follower of Jesus, I look and go, man, we literally have the silver bullet to this, which is Sabbath, which is this idea that there's a day a week where I don't have to produce anything. I get to be reminded I'm not a machine, and I just get to be a human and realize I have limits. And that transfers over into this beautiful concept of sabbatical, which is an extended period, and I say 4 weeks or more, with the intention to replenish, not to produce something else like an academic sabbatical to write a book, away from your primary work. Sometimes people have kind of other work they have to attend to just a little bit, um, and with that, the intention to come back stronger. And that's really important. It's not the intention for me to go leave somewhere else and look for another job. Like that's not what we're talking about here. It's actually this space to go, what if I could be more resilient? What if I could be more grounded? I just got off the phone with a guy, and he's on sabbatical right now, and he's asking, man, what kind of dad do I want to be? I want to be a more grounded dad. I'm more patient right now. What kind of husband do I want to be? What kind of friend or human do I want to be? And there's just things that work has gotten in the way and become the primary thing. We try to fit everything else in around it. And then there's this season where work is pulled out from underneath us in a beautiful and hard way. And we get to function as a human, where my primary role is to wake up and be a dad. And I experienced two sabbaticals, did the best I could, Justin, with the resources I had, and called people and read books and got advice. And some of that was terrible advice, by the way. And I really realized I needed somebody in my life to just check in with that could go, "You're doing well, man. This is fine. This is normal. Here's something to pay attention to." And so I get the opportunity now to be able to help people prepare for, navigate, and then reorient back to work, rest, life rhythms, all that afterwards through this disorienting and amazing time that is sabbatical. So that's kind of the what and some of the why. Again, we're overrun and we're exhausted in our culture. It doesn't matter whether you're a parent, a business leader, a ministry leader, nonprofit leader. We are carrying way too much in terms of communication and expectations and opportunities, things that we have done, that we get this time to go, oh man, I just get to rest. I actually got a graphic sent to me, a screenshot from somebody's, it was, I think, from their Whoop band or from their, I don't know, their Apple devices or whatever. Their heart rate had gone down significantly from what their average was. And
Mm,
they're like, whoa, this is fascinating, that the body and the mind and the heart and even the soul just thaw out a little bit. And you just get time to dream a little bit and space to go, man, I don't think I was as sharp as I thought I was.
mm.
I was more tired than I thought I was. I was more distracted. I was more grumpy with my kids than I thought I was. And that's not the kind of person, dad, leader, human, friend, husband that I want to be.
Would you mind sharing your own story? I mean, you can't write a book about anti-burnout with probably experiencing some level of that. So, what's your story behind this?
Yeah, just I work with high capacity leaders first of all, and so really only high capacity leaders who want to grow. They're people that want to submit themselves to coaching and want to grow and ask questions, and so it can easily lean toward this grit and hustle culture. And I'm all for resilience. We get knocked down and we dust ourselves, back off, get back up, do the next right thing. But for us, it becomes a way of life many times. And so I realize that without even thinking about it, as an entrepreneurial leader, and many of folks listening are entrepreneurial, even if maybe you're more of an entrepreneur inside of an organization, um, we get so much identity from that. And what I realized is that that was sort of the thing that I was always thinking, oh, I can always outwork somebody else. From the time I was 15 years old, I was working in the summers, and I would remember telling my principal, now on to the real work. Like, we literally left the last day of school, and it was like, now on to the real stuff where I get to go work a job, get to go make money, get all this school stuff, out of the way,
Hmm.
and transferring one type of work for another type of work. And that's the way that I've been functioning for a really long time. Now, I love joy and rest and replenishment and adventure. I get a lot of time, in the outdoors, but not much time for the margin, for the in between, for the time to just be able to be. So I've been learning a new operating system for about the last decade. And I'll say Sabbath changed my life. I was running really, really hard. And I just had when something would hit, we either need more finances or chaos hits or there's, the next crisis. What I would do would be hit the dial up faster, like on the treadmill. And that's what I knew how to do was just run a little harder, push a little harder, instead of to step back and reevaluate and go, what really matters? What are my priorities? And that is the hardest thing I help a leader do is to say, what truly matters to you, Justin? What is the good life for you? What is worth saying yes to? And therefore, what is worth saying no to? And so I began to do some hard prioritizing work, actually adopted two children. So we went from 0 kids to a 6 and 2-year-old from across the world who came with a lot of trauma and challenges that bio kids don't usually come with. And I had to learn limits. And so I've had this beautiful gift of limits, and they have 4 names, and they're my kids. And they have forced me in the most beautiful and accidental ways, right? They didn't mean to, but they forced me to figure out what truly matters to me. What are my priorities? Because I may suck it up at work that day, but I'm not going to miss this moment with my kids right now. This precious, pretty small opportunity that I get while they're younger to be a dad. And so that was really the forcing function in my life, as they say in design work. And that's led me to a beautiful opportunity to learn the word no. And so I talk a lot about that in Anti-Burnout, but I'm working with so many leaders who are overburdening themselves, putting way more pressure on themselves than any boss ever would, and putting way higher expectations on themselves than any parent, teacher, coach, or person in their life, friend ever would to them. So that's been some of my journey. There's been a couple inflection points along the way that are harder than others. That I felt like, man, I'm exhausted right now, and I really had to practice these principles. And so I believe in them. They've become a way of life for me and for many others. And I watch them free people all the time as a coach, and even people reading the book saying, I was crying driving down the road and I had to pull over. I couldn't see because I realized I'm way more depleted than I thought. And so it starts kind of rough, honestly, in the book, Justin. It's like, we have a problem. Here's a burnout epidemic. And it becomes, I think, more practical and more hopeful as the book goes along.
Yeah, I particularly like your section talking about how caring can be a differentiator. And you mentioned about how a bank just cared for you during a hard time, a financial time
Mhm.
that really stood out to you, and you took that challenge upon yourself to show your clients, I'm willing to care for you, and here's what I do. How do you show care to your clients? I think that's kind of interesting. It's a beautiful statement, and I'm interested to know how you do that.
Yeah, there's kind of this baseline of what people would expect in coaching, and I think that's true of every industry. Here's what you can expect, and frankly, here's the contract. Here's the covenant relationship you're in. Here's what we've agreed upon. But I always want to underpromise and overdeliver. And so what they're probably not expecting is a note. What they're probably not expecting is we send all our clients a copy of the right side up journal,
Mm,
and I use it every day. And so I'm glad to show them things within that. I'll be coaching a guy named Mike later, and when people don't sign up for their slot, we have a use it or lose it, um, agreement up front. But I don't want Mike to lose his slot, so I'm like, hey man, I got an extra slot. Somebody canceled. Anyway, this can work for you.
mm,
And they have no doubt that I'm not just serving them because they pay me, but to go like, I truly care. Well, let me back up. Let me go upstream of that. What has to be true for that to happen is I actually have to only agree to coach people that I truly care about them and their life, which means if somebody just wants to make $8 billion just to get richer, I can't coach that person because my heart's not actually invested in it. Like that's not actually going to change the world if that person just makes $8 billion and doesn't know what to do with it.
mm,
But the person that I truly care about the journey that they're on and I truly care about helping them succeed, that's me saying yes or no. So it really comes back to an integrity issue of, do I believe, first of all, that I truly care about this person? Do I want them to win and succeed? Do I believe that that would actually change something? And secondly, do I believe that I can help them? One of my favorite things to say is, I'm confident I can help you. I'm not sure exactly what we'll discover. I don't know. That's part of the joy and the mystery and the curiosity, but I'm confident that I can help you. Let's dive in together. And that's a challenge. I've sent people, I give plenty of referrals to other people and don't get any money back from those to other coaches that are a better fit. And I'll say often, I don't think I can serve you
mm.
very well. I'm not the right fit. It's not you, it's me. But I am convinced that I can outcare other people in that. I'm not the best coach in the whole country, and I'm not the most expensive coach in the whole country. I'm not the cheapest coach, but what I am is the one that says, "Hey, when I say that I'm going to be on this journey with you, I'm here." And I'll be there to serve them as long as they want. When it's time for it to be done, then they're done. But often, then I'll text them, 3 months later, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm just curious. I truly want
Mm.
that person to succeed even years afterwards. And sometimes they'll accomplish a goal 2, 3 years after coaching that we had set out to, and it lights me up.
I love to have these conversations and to ask this question in particular. It's you're obviously caring for others and doing a lot for your family. How are you in this season providing for yourself? It could be super
Mhm.
practical, health, wellness. It could be something more spiritual. Take it any direction you want to. But in this season, how are you providing for yourself?
Yeah, I love that question. I predominantly provide for myself by giving myself space out in creation. I live in Colorado and I live here for a reason. I love the mountains. I love getting outside. And I'm an extrovert, but I desperately need time by myself to be grounded, especially coming into working with clients. By the way, if I provide well for myself and give myself some space and time, and out this morning, even going for a walk and looking up at the mountains, then I can come in grounded to this conversation. I can serve you and your listeners well, Justin. I have 3 other coaching clients today, and I can serve them well, in addition to the one that I served before this. And so keeping those hours sleep is a big one for me, that I just neglected for many years, thinking, oh, we're a robot. We could just go 1, 2, 3 more cups of coffee and a little bit of adrenaline will get us there. Man, eventually that's going to hit a crash zone. And so that's one of the ways, is just my physical health. But what I find is if I get out into creation, things like fishing, that's deep play for me, fly fishing. And I do some pack rafting, which is an inflatable kayak down a stream. You really can't afford to just kind of lose track of time there. There's times to lay out and, just relax. But for me, I'm trying to read the rapids. That could literally be a big deal for me if I read it wrong. And so to be in this is form of deep play, I can't think about work in that moment. So giving myself that mental space away from it is huge. I was at the pool yesterday with my son, and I work an early schedule, and I'm done by 3 o'clock. What I realized is I don't serve myself or anybody else very well after 3 o'clock. but I'm also the after school parent. And so it allows me to provide for my family emotionally, just to be there as a dad and driving them around. My wife runs a foster care agency and needs to work till 5:30 each day. And that's been a beautiful thing. And I just believe there's so many dads who would love to be able to get off at that time, but just can't control their work schedule in the way that I can. And I'm gifted and graced with the ability to be an entrepreneur and to run a couple businesses and to make my own hours. And so that's, part of the provision. And I think that self-care runs beautifully into, caring for others, because eventually we don't care for ourselves, then we're not going to be able to care very well for other people. And usually the result of that is resentment and anger.
Mhm. So true. Smiling because it's a lesson I learned over and over again as well with that. And just going back to a comment you made earlier, kind of jokingly, but it's so true how kids are a self imposed discipline and limitation in our lives. And at the same time, sometimes we need those constraints in a positive way, just like you've done it in your schedule. Hey, I'm going to
Yep.
have a constraint where I'm done at 3 o'clock. And because of that constraint, that allows me to focus on the work a little bit earlier and then be that at home presence for the kids. So I love that example because I'm sure it would be easy for me at least to say, well, I control my own schedule. So I'll bleed it out until, as long as I
Sure.
possibly
Why
can.
not? I could do this. I could do this. And you do that for 7 straight days and wonder why you're getting exhausted.
Exactly. Well, just if someone wants to dive deeper into your work, whether it's books or online, like how can people find you and connect with you? What's a good place to start?
I am so proud of what we were able to produce in this book. And I say we, I don't do anything by myself. I have a team. And within this book, the question we were asking at the beginning of it was, what would have to be true for this to be the best deal in leadership development? And I know that's like a huge statement, but to say for 15.99, what if we could actually give people a coaching experience? Because coaching is a big investment. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money. Not everybody can afford coaching, but what we've done in this book is create this beautiful pathway to say, hey, if you really want to grow, we've got tools there. We used to charge more for one tool than we charge for the whole book, but we've got QR codes and links and questions. Those are some of my coaching questions that people pay me thousands of dollars to ask them over a period of time. And so I know this one gal, Justin, she's like, oh, I'm hacking the coaching process in the book and going slow. And I'm like, I'm so glad. That's why we created it. So I would honestly say head on over to Amazon and purchase a copy of Anti-Burnout and go through it slowly.
Hmm.
Go through it slowly. And if at the end of that, you're convinced that coaching could be a helpful upgrade and an uptick, especially if you're hitting, a huge season of life growth or transformation or change, then reach out to us. We've got a team of coaches. But I honestly think so much of our best stuff over the last 5 years of doing this full time, 13 years of doing, being a coach overall, I put into this book in a way that I think people could really extract a lot from that. And each section's a little bit different, as you know, and reads very, very differently in that. So that's honestly what I would say. If people want to pop over to our website, stayforth.com, stayforth.com. And our heart behind everything we do is health before impact. Health before impact. Like when the roots of your life get healthy, and Jesus talks about this, when the roots of your life are healthy fruit is going to come from it. But we live in a culture that's obsessed with the fruit. That's like, oh, how do I get that?
Hmm.
But those people have taken years to cultivate the roots, years for that fruit to be able to grow. And that's the part that you can't see. It's the hard work under the surface, privately, secretly, just doing the work, just being resilient, just keeping showing back up in that. And so I think it's kind of a cool opportunity to get behind the curtain of my life more than just a podcast interview. Is like, hey, like here's some of my failures, here are some of my victories, here are the things that truly matter to me that I'm proud of that the world may not celebrate that much. Like I just got back from a trip with my 12-year-old celebrating a rite of passage through from 12 to 13. I'm deeply proud of that. But nobody other than my best couple of guy friends is going to pat me on the back and say that really matters. Like they would if you whatever release a new book or start a podcast. So I'm committed to having people around me that truly care. And this is an invitation into community as well. That I think people going through this together are going to learn a whole lot more than the ones going through it alone. So that'd be my take. Pick up a copy of the book from Amazon. Go through this with a friend or two. Discuss hard things that come up in that. That's the intention for it.
Yeah, I've got a copy and also the audio version as well. And I'm glad you mentioned the questions because it's more of a, from my experience, it is more of like a workbook experience.
Yeah.
Like be ready for the questions and be ready for the reflections because you do unveil your go-to coaching questions that help people really process and reflect. And that's what I've noticed about the book is like these like and you can jump around to the specific chapters and sections that really interest you, like we talked about earlier with the caring section or the season, the sliver of opportunities that come up. I love those. So that's a little preview for those that are interested in the book. Alan, I'm so glad that had a chance to connect and get to know each other a little bit today. Were there any other stories or moments that you wanted to reflect on of God providing for you or other people providing for you before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I always say that the greatest provision that God um, ever gives to us is through relationship. And maybe that leads to a check, or maybe that leads to that last minute Venmo when your family's struggling, you just had a crisis, but it's through a person. And sometimes in the right season of life, you don't know that you're lonely, or you don't know that you need a campfire conversation with somebody, or you don't know that you just need to be able to be in relationship with somebody going through the same kind of thing that you're going through. But by far, God's greatest provision to me and to those that I'm in relationship with has been people. And so looking more for the who than the what is something that has been a helpful discipline for me. And I would encourage listeners to think through. Um, but I got to kind of end with a hard season for us. I am so grateful for this summer because last summer was the exact opposite. It's been a beautiful summer for my family and I. We've had so many cool times together, a lot of time away from work. But last summer ground us down in so many ways. We had a lot of travel, and travel does what travel will do sometimes and wears you down. I slept in several airports as a lot of flights were canceled last summer. But going back, we'd had a basement flood, and our kids, we have 3 kids that live in our basement. And so they were like sleeping in our living room.
Mm.
And it was, I mean, it was over a $200,000 insurance battle. I mean, it was just madness. It just wore us down in these ways. It got construction workers working in the house. I'm basically running general contractor. And then we had the nightmare of bed bugs happen after that whole process and trying to get those out with multiple treatments. All this to say that every area of my life, except for work, had worn me down. And my kids were wrestling through some different things. Plus, they were just, exhausted by the dust and the construction. Every area wore us down just a little bit. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. And then people just sprayed us down with lemon juice. And so the sting of that season, I found myself not ready to head back to school, had to head back in the fall and that climb that we experienced. And so I had to do a timeout and say, I'm really tired. And during that time, again, put these principles into play and took more time and space away, changed my schedule, more time in the outdoors, fed some of those areas like working out and sleep that had been worn down by the natural process of life. We hadn't done anything wrong. Life just happened to us. And I'm glad to say that the principles in this book work. And just as I replenished, I found God say, go, it's time to write this message. And so it was as if the message needed to be sealed in me before it went out to other people. And so I just want to encourage you in that. You're going to have hard seasons. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And so it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to replenish so you can care for yourselves, your family, the people around you, maybe your team or your organization, so that ultimately you can be a blessing to other people.
Boom. I love that, Alan. That's a great message to leave people with. So, thanks so much for the time. The book is Anti-Burnout, A Lighter Way to Live and Lead in a Heavy World. So, for those on the video, you can check out the cover here. Um, you know, you asked why I did this podcast before we clicked record, and it's to become the best provider I can be by connecting with thought leaders like yourself and servant leaders like yourself. Thank you so much for your time, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, man. Keep up the great work.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and I want to provide you with one more thing before you go, called Always Provide. Would you enjoy getting some encouragement each Wednesday to help you get over hump day? If so, subscribe to our free newsletter at clthomasfellowship.org. It's easy to sign up, And it's sort of a diary of ways that I'm personally learning to provide and serve more like Jesus. I share inspiring books, scripture, stories, and even products that are helping me to always provide. So if you want to try it out, go to clthomasfellowship.org/newsletter and sign up. So until next time, keep serving others like Jesus. Bless and protect. This podcast was edited by the Kristen Fields Chadwick podcast team. Kristen and her team are passionate about equipping faith-based podcasts like this one to share their message by owning the entire editing and distribution process. This has been a delight to work with their team, and I'm so excited to partner with them ongoing. So if you want to have their support, hire them at KristenFieldsChadwick.com, or if you just want to learn from their work, you can listen to their podcast titled Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. That's Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. And Kristen has actually been a guest on this very show. You can listen to her story at episode 116.